Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends and acquaintances and next-door neighbors about the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And if you can, please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Meg Welch Dendler. She'll be joining us to celebrate Bianca, the brave, frail, and delicate princess. Before I invite Meg into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids broadcast is brought to you by I Will Love You Always. And Until We Meet Again, two beautiful picture books written by Melissa Lyons. When faced with the loss of a loved one, sometimes it's hard to find the right words. Regardless of our age, we can all feel grief deep within us. That's when it's time to turn to the beautiful, comforting, and deeply insightful books. I Will Love You Always and Until We Meet Again. Loving guidance and consoling messages from our loved ones who have passed help to ease our pain and give us reason to reach for hope and love. Purchase your copies today. I Will Love You Always and Until We Meet Again, the two beautiful, comforting picture books by Melissa Lyons. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by an exciting middle grade novel that is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony L. Mena. When Lucas loses all his riches and his family, he sets off on a treacherous journey through a frightening forest filled with suspense and strange creatures to find destiny, sun, and moon. These celestial guardians will surely allow him to reverse his misfortune, restore his honor, and win back all that he loves and treasures. Won't they? A reimagined Greek folktale, Lucas and the Game of Chance, is illuminated with dramatic and evocative pen and ink drawings that provide an ideal backdrop for this haunting story of human struggle, courage, and resilience. Get your copies today. Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony L. Mena. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Arkansas. Our guest today is here to celebrate her middle grade novel. It's called Bianca, the brave, frail, and delicate princess. Please welcome to the show, Meg Welch Dendler. Hey, Meg, how are you?
I'm just wonderful. Thank you for having me on the show.
Delighted to have you on the show. I am really curious to learn all about Bianca.
Bianca is my lovely, lovely heroine. It is actually a very carefully crafted hero journey book. That's not how it started out. Bianca's life actually began when I was in 5th grade. I wrote it was a class project. We had to write a picture book, and I wrote about this princess that nobody thought could do anything. They thought she was frail and delicate, but she managed to go and kill the dragon. And it got a little award. It won a little bit of the contest. And I went, oh, I could be a writer. This is a thing. This is something I'm good at. And I continued to write, I wish I had it all, the little stories that I continued to write throughout the year and share with my classmates, and we had a good time with it. But she kind of went in a drawer, and then as I started professionally writing articles and publishing, I started pulling it back out. And I wanted it to be this lovely, the fairy tales that you and I both grew up with, the beautiful picture books with the glorious illustrations. And publishers don't really do that anymore. That's just not the trend currently. So I poked at the story a little bit and, what else could happen to Bianca? What else besides, how does she get to the dragon? What's the whole story here? And little by little, it developed into a whole novel and into a sequel and into, I'm sure, another sequel because I absolutely left it, ready for book 3 to happen in the future. Wonderful. So she's gotten this whole life since 5th grade.
That's so neat. Now, was Bianca somehow inspired by your own life or by the life of one of your classmates?
I don't know specifically, but, I think girls in general know that feeling of being considered unable to do things or less. My parents certainly never treated me like I couldn't do stuff, but that idea, in gym class, if you don't hit the first pop-up, well, they just quit hitting you pop-ups, and the guys tell you to get out of the way. There isn't that sense of developing a lot of things. It's gotten much better. Mm-hmm. I'm in my 50s. It's gotten a lot better for girls in school, in gym class, whatever. But I think there was definitely that sense of, well, the princess doesn't go kill the dragon. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot more books now where she does. I'm not the only one that's taken up that bandwagon of brave, strong princesses. But when I was in 5th grade, not so much. Mm-hmm. All of the fairy tales were still the fairy tales. And so obviously she stayed with me that long, so it was a character that I clearly felt some attachment to.
Absolutely. And thankfully things have changed. I am older than you, so yeah, I don't remember reading any stories where there was a female character that wasn't being saved by the prince.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How lucky are we that we have grown from that point?
Where absolutely.
We have lots of characters, lots of characters in books and on TV, powerful, capable women, and not only that, but male characters who respect those powerful women and work together with them.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's probably still a ways to go, mm-hmm. but it's just become a matter of who is this character and what is she going to do? What is she going to accomplish? And I wish I could remember what movie it was, but when the big male lead shows up to not save, but be beside the female lead, his line to her is, "What do you need?" Mm-hmm. Instead of almost the, mansplaining of our history of the man swooping in and now magically saving everything. It was more, I'm here as your backup. I'm mm-hmm. here to support you. I know this is your mission, your journey, but what can I do? Which could be a male or a female coming in to help. Mm-hmm. We have definitely come a long way. And I like to celebrate that. I think that's why I felt it was the right time to put out Bianca's story, however I had to do it. Because that is so much where we are now. Mm-hmm. We're ready to celebrate that. We're ready for that princess who, and it's not so much that she's just a princess. She is born very frail. Her mother mm-hmm. dies when she's born. The father has reason for being overprotective of her and not wanting her to leave the castle, because what if she gets sick, and what if he's super, super scared and overprotective? But she knows that's not true. She knows she's okay. She knows she can do it. And, when the dragon comes, she has her moment where she can, the king's vanished, the soldiers aren't showing up, they don't know what's happening. It's on her. She's the princess. She has to go and help her kingdom. And, she gets that moment in her life that sometimes we get and sometimes we don't. Sometimes you have to force, but for her, it's forced on her. Now is your time. Get out there. And she, runs into some fairies at one point that have heard all these legends about her, that she can't even stand upright on her own. She can't put on her own shoes or eat on, this drama and legend around her. She has to counteract during her little journey to get to the dragon. And in then her future life, because mm-hmm. there's a next book beyond mm-hmm. that, beginning to take a bigger part in the kingdom when everybody's just heard all this silly stuff about her whole life.
Now, what do you think it was? Now, because you were saying you didn't have these kind of books, but yet as a 5th grader, you had the courage to write this story and create this character. What do you think it was that gave you that courage to share this story with an audience that you had no reasonable expectation would accept it?
I'm going to credit my mom mm-hmm. reading to me, books that were probably a little inappropriate, but reading me the Dragon Rider series by Anne McCaffrey. And yes, when I was in 5th grade, she used to cut some things, as I learned when I read them when I was older. She read me the Once and Future King, the stories of Camelot, and which doesn't necessarily have a lot of brave women, but definitely the Dragon Riders of Pern series, because the women are really the driving force. Dragons, again, I will fully credit Anne McCaffrey with my love of dragons. Those were the characters that she read to me before I could really read them to myself. They, for a 5th grader, those are some kind of intense. There's a lot of vocabulary. But she was a member of the sci-fi book club. She had all these books in the house. And I think science fiction embraced it sooner than other genres did, that the women could be the leaders and the fighters. And Lessa and her dragon, though, those were important characters in my head growing up, that these golden dragons were the ones in charge. The women were in charge. They ran everything. It couldn't exist without the female leads in those books.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we talk a lot here on the podcast about the value of continuing to read aloud with our kids after they become independent readers. So many people out there. And I think I was initially surprised when my son became an independent reader and his teacher urged me to continue to read aloud to him. And I'm like, but really? Because he can read by himself. And she's like, no. It's just keep reading. And I did. And we know that kids are able to comprehend on a greater level than they're able to read, especially when they have a parent, a caring adult with them to help explain the words and the concepts that they might not understand. And I love that your mom was a bit of a rebel and read some stuff that was kind of maybe considered inappropriate for a 5th grader, editing it,
Yes.
And I think that's important for us to remember as parents. We can introduce our kids to stories and situations and ideas, and if they're originally published in a way with words and situations that we don't feel comfortable with 100% of that, we can just cut it out and, massage it around to make it more appropriate for our kids.
Yes, absolutely. And they won't necessarily know you're doing it at that moment if you read it ahead of time and are prepared. And she did that with a lot of books. Watership Down and, things that were popular at the time. She read to me. And I would love to say I did that with my kids as much as I could. I think it's a lot harder now. There's so much else, so many other ways to get input, even just from books, than having your parents read to them, because you have audiobooks. I mean, that wasn't a thing, Fortunately, my daughters do enjoy reading and enjoy having books recommended by me to them. But I wish I had been able to do that a little bit more with them and kept that up longer. We definitely, did it beyond picture books. We did into chapter books. But as a teacher, I did that as well. We had, I remember even when I taught middle school, we had a 5th, 6th class and a 7th, 8th grade class. And after lunch, the 7th, 8th grade teacher had a book he was reading with them, and I had a book I was reading with my class. And, that was just a little quiet time after lunch. It's been a lot of years. I would love to tell you any of the ones I read, and I don't remember. But I'm sure they had to do with whatever, curriculum we were doing. Number the Stars, by Lois Lowry, or something wonderful like that. That, sure, they could read those to themselves. It was a private school. They were actually very advanced kids. But having it read to you is just a different experience, having that quietness and just letting it flow without having to worry about what is that word I don't maybe know. Well, the teacher knows it. And when you hear it, you just can't maybe read it, in 6th grade, 5th grade as clearly yet. So I'm a big proponent. Happy to be with you here, knowing that's what y'all are doing too.
Yeah. And I remember, not in 7th grade, but I remember being in 4th grade and I think 5th and 6th grade, really looking forward to the times that our teachers would read aloud to us. and because it was quiet. And it's all flooding back to me. I remember the teacher shutting off the lights and inviting us to put our head down on the desk if we wanted to. And I'm sure there were days when I fell asleep. But it didn't matter because it was comforting. And if I did fall asleep and missed a paragraph or two, I was able to make it up. And it was just a really pleasant, enjoyable moment. And I really would encourage everybody to just check that out. Your 7th graders, your 8th graders, people always complaining how miserable those kids are in middle school. I visited, I've visited thousands of schools over the years doing my educational magic shows, and hey, how's everything here? Oh, these are great kids. Well, the 8th graders, oh man. But when they would come into my show and they would hear my stories, and as I was telling stories through my magic, they were great. And I think that's a way, a really good way to help bring out the great in those kids who are oftentimes kind of miserable to be around.
It's a hard time in life. I think Jane Austen calls it those trying years. The trying years where we're figuring out who we are and what we want to be, and your bodies are going crazy. Yes, give them just some stories. Read them, The Giver. They know what all of that is. They understand what all of that is that those characters are going through and being kept from.
Yeah. And one of the things, too, in a number of times principals or teachers would comment that the thing they found most magical about my show is that as these kids, and I did a lot of inner city schools, as these tough inner city kids would sit there and watch my magic, they became little kids again. And it just allowed them to put down the facade of having to be tough or having to be that 8th grader, that mature, beyond my years kind of thing, and just allowed them to chill and relax. And I think that's the same thing that happens when we read with our kids.
Yep. They don't have to react. They don't have to respond.
Yep.
They can just be.
Yeah. So beyond just bringing Bianca to life, what is it about writing for this audience that you enjoy so much?
Goodness. Well, I loved teaching kids this age. I mean, I think a lot of middle grade readers come at it, or middle grade writers come at it from having been teachers. I mean, I was the reading teacher. Books for that age. I still read books for that age. I read not necessarily YA, but middle grade books. I read them a lot, and I'm friends with those authors. There's just something very simple about it to some extent. But, when you talk to writing groups, I say, yes, I have to do all the same things that you have to do, but I've got 40,000 words to do it in. I can't just ramble on and on. You've got to get to the point. There has to be a purpose to it. You can't just have a love story. It has to have some kind of purpose. I have another series that is my alien rescue cat series. And it started, with my own cat and her silliness. And it started silly. But really, the story behind the story is about love and family and making those decisions of who you're going to be in this world. What's important to you, what you're going to fight for, what you're going to fight against. And you can't necessarily do that in adult books as well. Adult books, they want mystery, they want thrillers, but sometimes those deeper things are lost. When you just get into fitting into a genre and doing the stories. And I do have 2 adult novels, but they're about a little bit more. They don't fit into the genres. And I think I like that about writing, and it's a communication. You're telling a story. And you want it to entertain, but you also want it to have some substance to it.
Yeah. Those questions that you challenge your readers to answer, to think about, what am I going to fight for? What am I going to fight against? I think those are questions that we should continue to ask ourselves throughout our lives. Even me now, as I'm approaching 100 years old, I think I should still be asking myself those questions. What's important for me? What is it that I want to fight for? What kind of changes do I want to see made here in our society? What kind of things do I want to make sure remain and are conserved? And I think too many of us stop asking those questions when we get out of middle school.
If we asked them at all.
If we ask them now.
You know,
Touché.
And that's the reality of some people's lives is it's, you know, what's the pyramid of, you know, hierarchy of needs. They don't get beyond just the basics sometimes, and that's too bad, but that's something literature in the classroom can bring to them. That if their home life is just getting through, those stories of bigger things can help them step outside of that for a little bit and think, there's this whole big world out there that I am going to hit at some point in my life, and get them to start thinking about those things, thinking about the bigger picture, the bigger life beyond, you know, the next meal.
So you've been involved with middle grade literature as a consumer, as a promoter in your classroom, as an author. Have you noticed that the genre has changed much over the years?
Well, certainly in the last maybe 5, even 6 years, it's gotten to be a lot more representative of the entire culture. And that is, even if you look at what publishers are looking for, they want own voices from people who are not white cisgendered people like me. They're really looking to tell some more of those stories. And I know that gets complicated in schools and what you're reading. But even Millicent Min, Girl Genius by Lizzie, and things like that, where you're having books that are representative of more than just the white community in the world. That is definitely really hitting middle grade fiction. You know, when you see the things that are coming out, Meg Medina's books, it's much more all the multicultural stuff hitting the middle grade world. Finally. I mean, there's always been some, but it has definitely taken a surge. So there's, you know, the lovely thing about a book is it never goes away.
Right.
It's, you know, whatever I write will be there in 40 years unless, you know, it'll be on a library shelf unless I pull them from circulation, and they're still out there in the world. So it's okay to have all of that in a big surge because the other stuff's still there. It's not going anywhere. But now we have new options where kids can see themselves on the cover, where they can hear their stories and even their language sometimes within the books, whatever it may be. And I really try to support that in, you know, what I share with other kids, what I buy for nieces and nephews for birthday presents, and what I read, what I get from the library myself. And they're good books, you know. Yeah.
And, you know, we definitely celebrate the fact that kids can see themselves positively represented in pages of books more and more these days. And in that way, books are great mirrors. But I also really want to emphasize to everybody out there that books can also be a window and can allow kids to see others in a way where they're not the other. That in a way that they can see that, this is a person, this is my brother, this is my sister, this is a member of my human family.
Yes, and that they're going through all the same stuff you're going through, and they're having to make all those same decisions of what they want to fight for and what's important to them. And, you know, even as usually in middle grade, the characters are that age, are the age of middle grade readers, and they are fighting all those same fights within their family and their community and their lives and making all those same decisions. Yeah. Oh, they'd have to do that too. Interesting.
So you shared with us that there are 2 books in the Bianca the Brave series right now. Can you give us a little peek about what the book 3 will be about?
Well, it just was really going to pick right up from the end of book 2, so I don't want to say too much because there's sort of a whammy at the end of that book of something that's going to happen in her life. Okay. So, you know, when you read the end of that, you'll know what's coming in book 3. And again, it's going to have to be, where do I fit in? This big change is going to happen in the kingdom, and what is she going to do next? How is that going to impact her? She has absolutely no control over it. And that's the, you know, again, whole new set of decisions that she's going to have to make when she's finally feeling like, hey, everything's settled. No, here's this new whammy the adults have thrown at you, and where do you fit?
Right.
What's your place in all of that?
Yeah. And what a great lesson for us to teach our kids. It's like, life really is never settled. Once you think that something's okay, whether you're a kid or whether you're an adult, there's going to be another curveball coming at you.
Always.
Always, yeah.
Always. In a New York minute, everything turns on its ear.
Yeah. Meg, tell us where we can go to find out more about Bianca and find out more about you.
Well, I have my website is megdendler.com, and everything is there, but all my books are there at Amazon, but they're pretty much everywhere else. Awesome. They're considered wide. They are, at Barnes & Noble. They're everywhere. If you find someplace they aren't, let me know, and I'll put them there. And you can get them all over. And you can always just request your local bookstore to see if they can order it and have it for you in a couple of days. Absolutely. And your library. Tell your libraries. Yes, absolutely. We've had a great time speaking to the author of the fantastic middle grade series, Bianca, the Brave, Frail, and Delicate Princess. Our guest has been Meg Welch Dendler. Hey, Meg, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you for having me on the show. Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Prudence Williams. She'll be returning to the show to celebrate the middle grade novel she just wrote with her husband, Dr. Terrence Shipman, The Adventures of Malcolm and Mahalia, the Robinsons. It's a really wonderful middle grade novel and a really wonderful conversation. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Speaking of not wanting to miss, if you are anywhere in the New England area on August 6, 2022, please be sure to get down to the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts, and help us celebrate the 1500th episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We will have loads and loads of books to give away to families. We'll have magic. We'll have story times. We'll have author interviews. We'll have interviews with our guests. And we'll have lots and lots of animals. The Buttonwood Park Zoo is one of the most beautiful zoos in the country. Come on down. It's happening August 6th, 2022, New Bedford, Massachusetts, Buttonwood Park Zoo. Join us for the celebration of episode 1500 of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Meg Welch Dendler. Please be sure to check out Bianca, the Brave, Frail, and Delicate Princess. Also want to thank our sponsors, Anthony L. Manor. Be sure to check out Lucas and the Game of Chance. And, of course, we want to thank Melissa Lyon. She is the author of I Will Love You Always. And until we meet again, two powerful, touching picture books that you will want to have in your family library. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Bell Castro, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.